While I was getting a manicure, I received a WeChat message from my childhood friend, Robin. I was at a 4S dealership just now and saw your husband buy a Porsche for a young girl. Oh, you're not rushing over to catch him in the act? No need. Later I still had a full body treatment scheduled. After that, Pilates. At 3, I had an afternoon tea gathering to attend. I really didn't have the energy to worry about this kind of trivial nonsense. Chapter 1. In the 4th month after giving birth, I was finishing today's Pilates session at the yoga studio. I took a deep breath, facing my reflection in the mirror. The woman in the mirror had regained a firm waistline. Only a faint trace of postnatal marks still lingered on her lower abdomen. $10,000 a month for a private trainer and nutritionist was indeed money well spent. When I returned home, my mother was holding my second child on the balcony, letting the baby bask in the sun. Her eyes lit up the moment she saw me. Your figure's recovered really well. You can barely tell you've had a baby. I touched my still slightly loose abdomen, smiled, and said nothing. But my mother's expression slowly grew complicated, as if she wanted to speak but hesitated. Erin came by this afternoon, she finally said, gently patting the baby in her arms. I squatted down to tidy up the scattered toys, my voice calm. He heard you weren't home, sat for a bit, then left. After a brief pause, my mother asked, You too, have you really decided to get a divorce? I stood up, a faint smile resting on my lips. No, we're not divorcing anymore. I'm moving back tomorrow. She was clearly stunned, her brows knitting together. Why the sudden change of heart? I figured things out, I said, taking the sleeping baby from her arms. This way, it's better for everyone. The next day, I returned to the home Erin and I shared, bringing along the nanny and both children. After settling the kids in, I took a long, leisurely essential oil bath. When I stepped out of the bathroom, Erin was already sitting on the sofa in the bedroom. You're back? He put down his phone and looked at me intently. I walked straight to the vanity and began my nightly, never skipped skincare routine. Erin came up behind me, resting his hands on my shoulders. Not angry anymore? I met his gaze through the mirror, the corners of my lips curving into a flawless smile. I've thought a lot these past few months. A successful man like you, how many don't fool around outside? I was immature before, always making a fuss. I won't anymore. From now on, I'll fulfill my duties as a proper wife. His fingers stiffened on my shoulders, a flicker of confusion crossing his eyes. Go to sleep, I said, standing up and smoothly avoiding his attempt to hug me. You smell like smoke. Go wash up first. Early the next morning, I met with my personal financial advisor, Ms. Lynn. Are you sure you want to allocate all your assets this way? The advisor, wearing gold-rimmed glasses, pushed up the bridge of his frames. Under the new marriage law, these are all considered joint marital property. I've already consulted a lawyer. This is how I want it, I said, handing back the pen. If anything happens to me, all my assets go to my mother and my children. At the notary office, the staff raised the same concern. Are you sure you don't want to leave any share to your spouse? I smiled slightly. My husband's net worth is more than 10 times mine. He wouldn't care about the small amount of money. When I got home, I was surprised to find Erin already sitting in the living room. At this hour on a workday, he was usually still at the office. Why are you home today? I'm meeting a client nearby this afternoon. His gaze fell on the document folder in my hand. What's that? I bought a few storefronts. I pulled out the contracts and handed them to him. Help me take a look. How's the location? Erin flipped through the documents, his brow gradually relaxing. See city's new district? Not bad, good eye. The municipal government plans to make that area a key development focus next year, so there's plenty of room for appreciation. That's good. I took back the documents and turned to head upstairs. Camellia, he suddenly called out to me. Has Robin been in contact with you recently? Without stopping, I replied, Yeah, we talked on the phone not long ago. Why? At that moment, my phone rang, a message from my eldest daughter's kindergarten group chat. The homeroom teacher announced that there would be a parent-child sports day next Friday and hoped both parents could attend. Erin's voice came from behind me, carrying an unnatural hesitation. She didn't say anything special to you? She did. Chapter 2. I lowered my head and replied in the group chat. There's a kindergarten event next Friday. Do you have time to attend? Silence spread behind me. After quite a while, he finally spoke. Of course, we'll go together. Really? Mommy and Daddy are both coming? My eldest daughter, Jasmine, had appeared at the top of the stairs without me noticing. She was hugging her teddy bear, her eyes sparkling. Mommy, you're not sick, are you? My heart clenched hard. Last year, because of the Cold War between Aaron and me, I deliberately skipped Jasmine's Christmas performance. Even now, the image of her hiding under the blanket and crying that night still filled me with guilt. This time Mommy promises. I squatted down and hugged her tightly. Daddy and Mommy will definitely go together. Aaron also walked over and wrapped his arms around both of us. Daddy promises too. Jasmine happily bounced upstairs. Aaron's hand still rested on my shoulder. His voice low. Camellia, about that girl. I want to explain. No need. I gently freed myself from his grasp. You're right. I should learn from my mom. Seeing things more openly is better for everyone. He stood there, stunned, while I turned and went upstairs. As I passed the study, I saw the new phone he had left on the desk light up. On the lock screen was a WeChat preview. Aaron, I really love the bracelet. Tonight. I quietly closed the door, the smile at the corner of my lips deepening. After all, now I had learned to solve problems with reason rather than emotion. The way Aaron and I met felt straight out of a romance drama. Back then, I had just returned from studying in the UK. My father insisted that I marry the son of the Jean family, an old family acquaintance, but that Jean heir, polite on the surface, was a regular at nightclubs behind the scenes, changing girlfriends more often than changing clothes. Camellia, a business marriage doesn't need feelings, my father said at the time, puffing on a cigar. The Jean family can help us break into the northern market. I smashed my father's favorite blue and white porcelain teacup. If you want me to marry that kind of playboy, you'd better wait until I'm dead. 3 months later, I met Aaron at a charity gala. He was wearing a perfectly tailored suit, standing quietly in a corner sipping wine, completely different from the rich second-generation men crowding around socialites and fawning over them. I took the initiative to ask for his contact information and spent nearly half a year before finally winning him over. My father was furious at first, until he personally inspected Aaron's company. It was a startup in smart home technology, small in scale, but with promising prospects. After several meetings, my father's attitude softened. He even introduced Aaron to a few important clients. After meeting Aaron, my mother said to me with meaningful undertones, "This child is very clear-headed. He knows what he wants, and he knows what price he has to pay." At the time, I thought it was praise. Only now did I realize that my mother had already seen through his true nature. My father was a self-made construction tycoon who had turned a small workshop into a publicly listed company over 30 years. After achieving fame and fortune, like most newly rich men, he began keeping women on the side. When I was 10, I personally saw my father walking out of a hotel with a young girl in his arms. "Mom, why don't you divorce him?" I once demanded angrily. My mother calmly ironed clothes and replied, "If I divorce him, wouldn't that just benefit those foxes?" Back then, I thought my mother was weak until I discovered the flirtatious messages between Aaron and his female assistant on his phone. I went hysterical, demanding a divorce, but my mother stopped me when I was 5 months pregnant. "Do you think I'm like you, swallowing my anger for a lifetime?" I screamed at her without thinking. The hand she raised never came down. She only sighed softly. "Divorce isn't dignity. Living well is." But I had worked so hard to maintain this marriage. Chapter 3. Every one of Aaron's shirts was ironed by me personally. I never missed his parents' birthdays. When I was pregnant with our second child, I vomited so badly I could barely stand. Yet I still insisted on preparing his breakfast every single morning. I naively believed that sincerity would be met with sincerity. Until that day, when I walked into Aaron's office and caught him with a female client. Their clothes disheveled. I smashed up his office, tore apart our wedding photos, was sent to the hospital twice due to emotional breakdowns, and even threatened to abort the baby. Aaron's parents flew back overnight from Hainan and beat him viciously in the hospital, right in front of me. After taking that beating, Aaron completely tore off his mask. In the hospital corridor, he grabbed my wrist, every word he spoke cutting into my heart like a blade. "Camellia, I thought we had reached an understanding before we got married. His gaze was so cold it made me tremble. I chose you because you were pure, filial, and suitable to be a mother. Didn't you choose me because you saw my potential? I stood there in a daze, my ears buzzing. I can give you a comfortable life and a respectable status. All you need to do is be the wife at home. He let go of my hand and adjusted his cufflinks. Why take those social flings seriously? Doesn't your father have illegitimate children too? Your mother is much smarter than you. Why can't you be like her? At that moment, it felt as if I heard my heart shatter. So the marriage I treasured like a priceless jewel was, in his eyes, nothing more than a transaction of interest. Every shirt I ironed for him, every carefully prepared dinner, meant less than a single flirtatious glance from a business partner. Marriage should be mutually beneficial, not mutual torment. He gave me one last look. If you keep making a scene like this, I'll have to reconsider whether this relationship is even necessary. I returned to the hospital room like a walking corpse, and only then did my tears finally break free. When my mother pushed open the ward door, I was staring blankly out the window. Sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting mottled shadows across my face, unable to hide my swollen eyes or my disheveled hair. She said nothing. She simply sat down beside the bed and pulled me into her arms. The familiar scent of her perfume mixed with disinfectant filled my nose, and I could no longer hold back, sobbing on her shoulder like a child. The two of us, mother and child, my mother said, gently stroking my back, her voice as soft as feathers. We've both been a little short on luck in this life, but compared with those legal wives who were driven to jump off buildings by mistresses, at least we still have money, and we still have a child. I lifted my head, searching her exquisitely made-up face for traces of resentment. At 50, my mother was still radiant. Her Chanel suit outlined a well-maintained figure, giving no hint that she was already a grandmother with a grandchild in kindergarten. Mom, why didn't you get a divorce? I asked hoarsely. She took out a compact from her bag and gracefully touched up my makeup. Silly girl, why should I give up a life of luxury to those wild women? Besides, she paused. In the mirror-like surface of the compact, my haggard face was reflected. If I really divorced him and a stepmother moved in, wouldn't a straightforward, soft-hearted girl like you be bullied to death? I thought of my aunt. Back then, when my uncle cheated, she made such a public spectacle of it that everyone knew. Now, at only 45, her face was already lined with wrinkles, her eyes forever filled with sharp, poisonous resentment. After the divorce, my uncle simply moved in with the mistress. My two male cousins grew up surrounded by my aunt's daily bitterness, and now they won't even answer their father's calls. Your uncle came to borrow money from your father last week, my mother said, closing the compact, her tone as calm as if she were talking about the weather. The wife he just married gave birth again, but his company is about to collapse. If you ask me, if your aunt had been a bit smarter, she'd still be a glamorous wealthy wife today. The ward door opened as a nurse pushed in the treatment cart. My mother stood up to make space. The jade bangle on her wrist tapped against the bedside cabinet, producing a crisp sound. It was a gift my father had brought back from an auction last year, worth 7 figures. That night, I stared at the ceiling for a long time. When dawn came, I wiped away my tears and said to my mother, I want to be discharged. That very afternoon, I completed the discharge procedures and moved back to my parents' home to recuperate. Every evening after work, Aaron brought Jasmine to see me, always remembering to buy my favorite blueberry cheesecake. We tacitly avoided mentioning that argument again, as if that soul-tearing conflict had never happened at all. Chapter 4. When I was 7 months pregnant, my father was in a car accident on his way to the airport. By the time I rushed to the hospital with my belly protruding heavily, my mother had already changed into a patient gown and was wiping my father's body. The man who once dominated the business world now lay in the ICU bed, tubes all over him, like a worn-out rag doll. Let that mistress come take care of him, I said through clenched teeth. My mother didn't even look up. This isn't a TV drama. She skillfully adjusted the 4-drip rate. At times like this, whoever stays by his side is the one who gets a say when the inheritance is divided. The mistress did come once. She wore an out-of-place short skirt and high heels, crying pitifully in the hallway, in front of all the doctors and nurses. My mother drove her out of the hospital with a loud, resounding slap. Every day, I carried my heavy body back and forth between home and the hospital. The baby kicked fiercely inside my belly. But I never again acted spoiled like I had when I was pregnant with Jasmine, asking Aaron to massage my legs or pound my back. My father's condition fluctuated between good and bad, yet my mother stayed by his bedside at all times. Impeccably dressed, not even a chip of her nail polish ever came off. The miracle happened on a morning 3 weeks later. My father suddenly opened his eyes, and the first thing he asked for was a lawyer. When Lawyer Wang arrived in haste, dressed in a crisp suit, my mother was calmly peeling an apple. The peel came off in one long, continuous strip, never breaking. On the day of my C-section, my parents-in-law wept with joy outside the delivery room. Aaron wanted to stay at the hospital with me, but I gently turned him down. Isn't your company about to sign that big smart home contract? Lying in the hospital bed, my tone was calm. There's a confinement nanny and nurses here. Go take care of your work. He bent down and kissed my forehead. I caught a faint scent of perfume from his collar, one I didn't use. But at that moment, my heart was full of the newborn child. I didn't even have the strength to frown. Camellia. Thank you, Aaron said, his voice slightly choked. I looked at the little one in the incubator and replied softly, "It's what I should do." He froze for a moment, clearly unaccustomed to my sudden understanding. But soon enough, the familiar, satisfied look appeared in his eyes. After all, what man doesn't want a wife who doesn't argue, doesn't make trouble, and knows her place? When the nurse came to wheel me back to the ward, I took one last look at Aaron through the glass window. He was on the phone, a perfectly appropriate business smile hanging on his lips. Sunlight poured in through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the corridor, outlining a silhouette that was growing increasingly unfamiliar to me. Now, as I stood in the walk-in closet organizing the contracts for the newly purchased storefronts, Aaron leaned against the doorframe, hesitating to speak. It reminded me of something my mother often said. A smart hunter often appears in the guise of prey. Camellia. That parent-child event, he began uncertainly. I'll be there on time. I interrupted with a smile. Jasmine is really looking forward to it. He opened his mouth as if he wanted to say more. But in the end, he only nodded and left. My phone lit up. It was a message from Robin. I checked it out. That woman is their new PR director. Her name is Lisa. Attached were several intimate photos of Aaron and the woman at a restaurant. I saved the photos and replied, "No need to follow them for now." After putting down my phone, I looked out the window. The setting sun stained the clouds blood red, just like my heart. Wounded beyond repair yet still beating. From today onward, I would learn to be like my mother, burying pain beneath an elegant smile. Not to forgive, but to win. Chapter 5. On the day of the parent-child sports meet, I chose a white athletic set. The clean tailoring highlighted my well-recovered postnatal figure, paired with pearl stud earrings and a light-colored lipstick. It was suitable for sports without sacrificing elegance. Aaron, who hadn't come home all night, arrived at the kindergarten in a perfectly tailored suit, clearly in a rush, drawing more than a few curious glances from other parents. "Mommy, Daddy!" Jasmine threw herself at us like a little bird. "You really both came." I squatted down and hugged her, feeling her warm body and excited heartbeat. At that moment, all calculations and defenses vanished. I was simply a mother who loved her daughter. "Of course," I said softly. "Mommy keeps her promises." After Jasmine ran off to join her friends, I turned to look at Aaron. His suit was expensive, but clearly out of place for a sports meet. "I prepared sportswear for you in the car," I said, taking out the car keys and handing them to him. "Go change. You'll need it for the parent-child events later." Aaron paused for a moment. When he took the keys, his fingers brushed against my palm. "You really thought of everything." There was a gentleness in his voice that I hadn't heard in a long time. It reminded me of how he was when we first met. "It's what I should do," I replied with a faint smile. "Go on. Don't keep Jasmine waiting too long." Watching his figure disappear toward the parking lot, I turned my gaze back to Jasmine in the distance. She truly looked happy today, jumping around nonstop. Thinking of how I had deliberately skipped her Christmas performance last time, a wave of guilt surged through me. Before long, Aaron returned in his sportswear. At the sports meet, Aaron, Jasmine, and I worked together seamlessly. We took first place in the three-legged race. And in the parent-child relay, Jasmine ran faster than she ever had before. Other parents looked at us with envy. Some even joked. "You two are such a perfect couple. Jasmine is so lucky." Aaron wrapped an arm around my waist and smiled smugly at the praise. I smiled back, playing the part of a model wife. Only I knew how calm I felt inside when he touched me. No racing heartbeat, no anticipation, just the quiet sense of fulfilling an obligation. After the sports meet, Jasmine fell asleep in the car from exhaustion. "Today was really nice," Aaron said as he drove. Jasmine smiled so sweetly. Yes, she really was happy. I looked at my daughter's peaceful sleeping face in the rearview mirror. "We should attend activities like this together from now on." He glanced at me sideways. "Camelia, you've changed." "How so?" "You've become more mature," he said carefully. "Before, you always wanted me to spend all my time at home. Now you seem more independent." I chuckled softly. People have to grow up eventually, don't they? When we got home, Aaron's phone started ringing nonstop. He glanced at the caller ID, his expression turning slightly awkward. "There's something urgent at the company." Go ahead," I said, picking Jasmine up and heading upstairs. "Don't forget to eat dinner." He froze for a moment, clearly not expecting me to be so accommodating. Chapter 6. After he left, I called Robin. "Lisa is waiting for him tonight in room 1203 at the Filihua Hotel," Robin said, her voice laced with anger. "Camelia, are you really not going to do anything?" "Do what?" I replied while coaxing Jasmine to take her bath. "He's an adult. He knows exactly what he's doing." "But, listen," I cut her off gently. "Don't worry. I know what I'm doing. And stop following them. Go live your life." After hanging up, I read picture books with Jasmine for a while. Once she fell asleep, I went into the study. Aaron's computer was still on. The screensaver was a family photo of the four of us. In the picture, I was smiling brightly and innocently, my arm tightly looped through his. I bypassed the computer and pulled several investment and financial management books from the bookshelf. Lately, I had been studying stocks and funds and had contacted a few reliable investment advisors. My mother was right. Money was a woman's greatest source of security. At 11 that night, Aaron came home. I was applying a face mask when I heard his footsteps upstairs. "Camelia?" He pushed open the bedroom door and looked a little surprised when he saw me. "You're still up this late?" "I just put the mask on. 10 more minutes," I said, pointing to the white sheet on my face. "Go take a shower. I'll be done soon." There was a faint scent of perfume on him, not Lisa's, but the kind of high-end room fragrance commonly used in luxury hotels. I lay calmly on the bed, as if I hadn't smelled anything at all. After the sound of running water came from the bathroom, my phone vibrated. It was a bank transfer notification. Aaron had just transferred 500,000 yuan to me. The note read, "Buy something nice for you and the kids." I stared at the message for a long time before finally replying. "Thank you, husband." A guilty man always likes to use money to make up for his wrongdoing, as if cash could wash away his sense of sin. When Aaron came out of the shower, I was just peeling off the face mask. "Your skin looks great," he said, sitting on the edge of the bed and tentatively reaching out to touch my face. I didn't dodge, but I didn't lean into it either. I simply said calmly, "Tomorrow I'm going to look at apartments with my mom." "Looking at apartments?" "I want to buy a school district apartment for Jasmine." I got up to wash my face. "There are a few decent ones near Minghu Elementary." He followed me to the bathroom door. "Do you need me to go with you?" "No need. You focus on your work." I applied hand cream while looking into the mirror. We women are more detail-oriented when it comes to house hunting. In the mirror, Aaron's expression was complicated. He probably hadn't expected that the once dependent wife who needed his opinion on everything no longer required his involvement even in something as major as buying property. The next morning, however, my mother called. "Your father isn't doing well. The doctors say he probably only has a few days left." Her voice over the phone was calm, as if she were talking about the day's weather. I immediately canceled the apartment viewing and drove straight to the hospital. In the corridor outside the ICU, my mother sat flipping through a financial magazine, her makeup still immaculate. When she saw me, she closed the magazine, her expression composed. "He suddenly deteriorated last night. He's only being kept alive by a ventilator now." My mother stood up and smoothed the hem of her Chanel suit. He wants to see you one last time. Chapter 7. Through the glass window of the ICU, I saw my father lying on the hospital bed, emaciated to the bone, tubes running through his body. The man who once dominated the business world now looked as fragile as a child. Can he still talk? I asked. On and off. But his mind is still relatively clear, my mother replied, glancing at her watch. Go in, I'll wait outside. The ward was quiet, filled only with the steady beeping of monitoring equipment and the low hum of the ventilator. Sensing someone enter, my father slowly opened his eyes. When he saw it was me, a flicker of light passed through them. Camellia. His voice was faint, like a fallen leaf drifting in the wind. I sat down by the bed and took his withered hand. Dad. I'm here. He struggled to regulate his breathing, as if gathering strength to speak. Your mother told me about Aaron, he said haltingly, pausing every few words to gasp for air. I know everything. My fingers tightened slightly, but my expression remained calm. Dad, rest. Don't talk anymore. No. I have to tell you this. He used all his strength to grip my hand. Camellia, men are all like this. You have to learn to endure. Those words, so similar to what my mother had said, still made my heart sink instantly. Even at the very end of his life, this man never once thought of standing up for me. His daughter. Aaron won't easily divorce you, my father continued, a familiar sharpness flickering in his eyes. When it comes to dividing assets, he definitely won't agree, as long as he doesn't bring trouble home, just turn a blind eye. I listened quietly, my heart utterly unmoved. If this had been in the past, I would have found it absurd. But after that conversation with my mother, I finally understood this was actually the most effective approach. As long as appearances were maintained, the greatest benefit could be gained at the smallest cost. Look at your mother, how well she's lived all these years. My father's voice grew weaker and weaker. She never made a fuss. She had everything she should have, enjoyed everything she deserved. Dad. I interrupted softly. You're tired. Get some rest. But as if determined to say everything he had left unsaid, he continued weakly. I already arranged the company shares. You and your mother each have a portion. With money, you'll have leverage. Remember what Dad said, endure it, and it will pass. After saying this, he seemed to have exhausted all his strength. His eyes closed, and he fell into a deep sleep. I sat in the ward for a long time, watching the rising and falling lines on the monitor. My emotions tangled and heavy. This was my father, a man who maneuvered brilliantly in the business world, yet failed completely as a husband and a father. The final lesson he taught me was how to endure an unfaithful marriage. I remembered when I was little, how he used to take me to his company and proudly introduce me to his employees. This is my daughter. Back then, I believed my father was the greatest man in the world. Now I finally understood. He was nothing more than a coward who didn't even dare to bear the consequences of his own actions. Chapter 8. When I walked out of the ward, my mother was discussing the next steps with the doctor. Her voice was still calm and composed, methodical and precise, just like she was handling an ordinary business matter. Camellia, what did your father say to you? My mother asked. I looked at her, the woman who had remained elegant and composed even after years of my father's infidelity. He told me to learn from you. My mother let out a soft laugh. Learn what from me? Swallowing my anger? He said men are all like this, that I should endure. My mother's expression instantly cooled. A flash of disgust crossed her eyes, one I had never seen before. Camellia, remember this, she said, turning to face me, her tone turning serious. My so-called endurance over all these years wasn't because of love, it was calculation. I stopped loving your father the first time he cheated. She continued softly, every word clear and sharp. The reason I didn't divorce him was because I was waiting for the most advantageous moment. And now, that moment has arrived. She glanced toward the ICU. He's about to die. He's already revised his will, and control of the company will soon be in my hands. Those young foxes will get nothing, and I will be the real winner. In the early hours of the next morning, my father passed away. When the hospital called, I was in the kitchen preparing breakfast for Jasmine. I calmly set the phone down and continued cutting fruit. Grandpa is gone, I said to Jasmine, who was eating breakfast. She paused, spoon in hand, her big eyes blinking. Where did Grandpa go? He went very, very far away. I said gently. He won't be coming back anymore. Jasmine nodded as if she half understood, then continued eating. After she finished breakfast, I changed clothes and went to the hospital. Aaron arrived shortly after receiving my call. He was wearing the clothes I had ironed for him that morning. His hair was slightly messy from rushing over. "Camelia, my condolences," he said, reaching out as if to hug me. I sidestepped him lightly. "Thank you, I'm fine." Over the next few days, my mother and I were busy handling all the funeral arrangements. During that time, a young woman in a black dress appeared in the morning hall. She looked about 28 or 29, with delicate features and eyes swollen red from crying. She was likely my father's last mistress. Holding a bouquet of white chrysanthemums, she tried to approach my father's portrait, but my mother stopped her. "I'm sorry. This is a family-only area," my mother said politely, yet firmly. The woman tried to explain. "I know who you are," my mother interrupted. "But here, you are nothing." The woman froze, tears surging even more fiercely in her eyes. "If you want to see him one last time, I can give you 5 minutes," my mother said, glancing at her watch. "Go ahead." The woman nodded gratefully and walked over to place the flowers before the portrait. 5 minutes later, she wiped away her tears and left quietly. From beginning to end, she didn't say another word. Watching her retreating figure, I suddenly thought of Lisa. If one day Aaron were to die, would Lisa also end up like this woman, only able to sneak in for one last look? The thought made me find it faintly absurd. Chapter 9. My father's funeral was held with great dignity. Friends from both political and business circles attended, and wreaths filled the entire morning hall. My mother wore a proper black suit, receiving condolences from all sides. Her manner was so elegant that it felt as though she were attending an upscale cocktail reception. Mrs. Lin is truly strong. After such a major upheaval, she still handled everything so thoughtfully. Old Lin was truly blessed to have married such a wonderful wife. Listening to these words of praise, I looked at my mother. Her face carried just the right amount of sorrow, not overly dramatic, yet perfectly dignified. This was what a smart woman should look like. 3 days after the funeral, we went to the law firm. Lawyer Wang explained my father's will in detail. Just as my mother had anticipated, 60% of the company's shares went to her, 30% to me, and the remaining 10% to the half-brother I had never met. In addition, my father left me 2 properties and a sum of cash. "Mrs. Lin, congratulations on officially becoming the controlling shareholder of Lin Building Materials," Lawyer Wang said, removing his glasses. "According to the company charter, you are now eligible to serve as chairwoman." My mother signed her name elegantly. "Thank you, Lawyer Wang. You've worked hard for us all these years." I put down my pen and looked at my mother. "Mom, I'm not signing." Lawyer Wang froze for a moment. "Ms. Lin, this is your lawful inheritance. I want to transfer this portion of shares and the properties to my mother," I said calmly. "Let's handle the transfer procedures now." My mother looked at me deeply, a trace of approval flashing in her eyes. "Camelia, have you thought this through?" "I have," I nodded. "Under the new marriage law, anything I inherit becomes joint marital property. If I were to divorce in the future, Aaron would be entitled to half of it." Lawyer Wang pushed up his glasses. "But Ms. Lin, your marriage is currently stable." "Lawyer," I interrupted. "There's no such thing as a relationship that stays stable forever. I'm just leaving myself a way out." My mother chuckled softly. "My daughter is right, Lawyer Wang. Do it exactly as she says." An hour later, all the procedures were completed. When we walked out of the law firm, the sunlight was just right. My mother put on her sunglasses, looking radiant and energized. "Camelia, from today on, the 2 of us finally have real leverage. Mom, how do you plan to handle the company?" "First, stabilize morale, then slowly clean up the mess your father left behind," she said, her voice carrying a firmness I had never heard before. "None of the old management who went along with your father's nonsense over the years will be kept." Suddenly, I understood why my mother had been able to endure at my father's side for so many years. It wasn't weakness. It was waiting for the chance to completely turn the tables. In the first month after my father's death, subtle changes took place in my life. My mother officially took control of the company and launched reforms with decisive force. As for me, I began appearing frequently at various business and social functions. Camellia, there's an investment salon tomorrow afternoon. Come with me, my mother said over the phone. It's time you start meeting some real business elites. I put down the financial report I was reading. All right, Mom. After hanging up, I looked toward Aaron, who was in the living room playing with the children. Lately, he had been coming home far more often, probably because, after my father's death, he felt he should keep me company more. But the irony was, I no longer needed his companionship at all. Chapter 10. I'm going out tomorrow afternoon. I closed the documents in my hands. Can you stay home and look after Jasmine? If not, I'll call the nanny. Aaron looked up, a little surprised. Where are you going? To a business event with my mom. I replied naturally. The company needs more hands now, and she wants me to help. His brow furrowed slightly. Camellia, can't your mom handle the company matters on her own? She can, but she wants me to learn more. I stood up and tidied the scattered toys. I can't be a housewife who knows nothing forever. Can I? Aaron put down our second child and walked over. I think you're pretty good the way you are now. How so? A virtuous wife and loving mother. Elegant, well-mannered. He reached out to wrap an arm around my waist. Why make things so hard for yourself? I sidestepped his hand lightly and smiled. Aaron, you don't actually want your wife to be a decorative vase who only knows how to spend money, do you? The investment salon the next day was held at a 5-star hotel in the city center. I wore a Chanel suit, paired with the emerald earrings my mother had given me. I looked dignified yet capable. Everyone attending today is an elite from various industries. My mother reminded me in the car. Remember, listen more, speak less. But when it's time to take a stance, be decisive. About 30 people attended the salon, most of them successful individuals over 40. Following my mother, I moved smoothly through the different social circles and quickly blended in. Chairwoman Lynn's daughter is truly impressive, a real estate developer praised. So young, yet already so insightful. I had just shared a few thoughts on real estate investment, which clearly left a strong impression on those present. You flatter me, I said, raising my glass. I still have a lot to learn from my seniors. In the 3 months after the salon, my life changed completely. By day, I followed my mother learning company management. By night, I returned home to spend time with the children. My schedule was packed to the brim. Aaron wanted to talk to me more often, but I always had a reason to brush him off. Camellia, aren't you too tired lately? One night, Aaron finally couldn't help asking. I was organizing an investment proposal in the study and replied without looking up. I'm fine, I'm used to it. You've changed, he said behind me, his voice carrying an emotion I couldn't quite place. How have I changed? I closed the file and turned to look at him. You used to revolve around me. Now, he paused. Now it feels like I'm dispensable in your life. I let out a soft laugh. Aaron, isn't this exactly what you always wanted? A wife who doesn't cling, doesn't make a fuss? He froze, clearly not expecting me to be so blunt. And besides, I stood up and organized the documents on the desk. Isn't my current state pretty good? I don't check your phone, don't follow you, don't make a scene when you're with other women. You're free to see Lisa, and I'm free to focus on my own career. Aaron's face changed instantly. You know about Lisa? Of course I do. I walked toward the bookshelf with my back to him. The new PR director, 26 years old. Nice figure. You've been together almost half a year, haven't you? Behind me came the sound of a chair being knocked over. Camellia, let me explain. Explain what? I turned around, a faint smile on my face. Explain why you chose her, or explain how the two of you met. Aaron opened his mouth but couldn't say a word. Actually, none of that matters. I walked up to him. What matters is that our current arrangement isn't bad. Is it? You have your Lisa. I have my career. The children have a complete family. You have a virtuous wife. And I have a successful husband. Everyone keeps up appearances. Chapter 11. But you don't love me anymore. His voice was very low. as if he were talking to himself. Love? I thought carefully about the word. Aaron, have you forgotten what you once said? He stared at me blankly, as if seeing me for the first time. You said you chose me because I was obedient, filial, and suitable to be a mother. My tone was calm. You used your status and resources to give me a respectable life. I used my gentleness and devotion to give you a stable home base. Wasn't that our unspoken agreement? Camellia, and now our transaction is even more equal. I continued. I'm no longer the little woman who only knows how to rely on you. I have my own career and my own value. You don't have to pretend to be a faithful, devoted husband anymore. You can openly enjoy your freedom. Aaron suddenly stepped forward and tightly grabbed my wrist. What if I say I want to go back to how things were before? I looked at him, my eyes completely calm. Before? Which before? Before you cheated? I can cut things off with Lisa, he said urgently. We can start over, okay? I gently pulled my hand free and turned toward the door. Aaron, adults shouldn't always be thinking about starting over. Once you choose a path, you walk it to the end. What do you mean? I mean we continue with our current way of living. I stopped at the doorway. You continue with your career and your love life. I continue with my growth and transformation. The children continue growing up in a complete family. We continue playing the role of a loving couple in front of others. But I will no longer love you. With that, I walked out of the study without looking back. A heavy sigh sounded behind me, but my steps never slowed. In the living room, Jasmine and the younger child were already asleep. The nanny was quietly tidying up the toys. Mrs. Lin, should I carry the little one back to his room? No need. Let them sleep here for a bit. I gently stroked Jasmine's hair. You can go rest now. After the nanny left, I sat on the sofa, watching the two sleeping children. This was my life now. No more passionate love. No more heart-rending pain. Only calm calculation and rational choices. Maybe this kind of life would have seemed tragic to my former self, but to the woman I am now, it is the best possible arrangement. My phone chimed. It was a message from my mother. Board meeting tomorrow at 10 a.m. Be there on time. I replied with a simple okay, then put the phone down and carried the younger child upstairs. From now on, this was the relationship between Aaron and me, not loving spouses, not strangers, but two adults who chose cooperation for their own interests. Perhaps this ending wasn't romantic, but at least, it was real. 3 years later, I stood on the stage at the company's annual gala, receiving applause from the audience. As the CEO of Lin Building Materials, I had just announced that the company's profits had increased by 30% this year. In the front row of the guest seats, Aaron applauded politely, a composed smile on his face. The woman sitting beside him was not Lisa. She had been transferred to a branch office a year earlier. Our eyes met briefly. There was eager admiration in Aaron's gaze, and only calm detachment in mine. Jasmine was already in 2nd grade. The younger child had begun babbling his first words. They had a successful mother and a gentle, attentive father, an outwardly perfect family. As for Aaron and me, we hadn't shared a bed in a long time, yet we were still husband and wife. We still attended parent-teacher meetings together. We still appeared hand in hand at important social events. This kind of life might not be exciting, but it was stable, and stability was exactly what I wanted now. My mother was right. Smart women never solve problems with emotion. In the end, we each won everything we wanted, in our own way.